My name is Dr. John S. Galliano, and welcome to my Collaborate Live session for CYB 4304, Cybersecurity Law and Policy. By now, you've had the opportunity to watch my course welcome video. I hope that you found the video welcome to be helpful. Today, I'm going to cover some important items to help you be more successful in the course. These will include a quick run through of the syllabus, a demo of the course textbook, and a walkthrough of the Lab 1 deliverable, Creating an Acceptable Use Policy. It is my hope that you can use this information to be more successful in the labs and deliverables throughout the rest of the course. So without delay, let's get started by going over to our course. And right now I'm on the landing page for the course in the Start Here area. I'm going to click on Syllabus. And in the syllabus we have here before us all of the important information that you need to know. And you can get the most out of this by coming back to this frequently throughout the course and checking on various things such as the grading parameters. For example, each discussion board that you participate in during the 8 units is worth 2% each, or a pretty hefty 16% of your overall grade. And then, of course, you can check the assignments on each of the units by clicking the little left or right-facing arrow there. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here now to show you the textbook. Now, if you've not been in the textbook, I strongly recommend that you do so at your earliest opportunity. We are using Security Policies and Implementation Issues, 3rd edition, and that is a brand new textbook with a copyright date of 2022. That's by Johnson and Eastham, published by Jones and Bartlett Learning. So the best thing about that is that we get to use the Vital Source e-reader. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the best e-readers on the market of any device or web-driven kind of format. I really like the Vital Source platform. So when you come into the textbook, you'll get some a navigation bar across the top. And you have some things where you can see analytics and you can search across the entire book. That's a really powerful feature right there. You can change some preferences in terms of font and shading, that sort of thing. You can see all of your highlights, notes, bookmarks, and flashcards in one location. And then you have more options where you can do some beta features. You can do some limited printing. You can download an app rather than use the web, and you can even have the platform read the book to you. On the left 1/3 of the main screen, you get a collapsible, basically table of contents where you can scroll all the way through the book, see all of the contents at a glance, and you can hit the table of contents. I call that a hamburger menu. To maximize the reading pain if you choose to do that. Now, I do want to also point out something that most students miss, and that's this little ellipsis over here. If you hover over it, it tells you it's more book options. But the reason I come here again and again is for the citation. So if I click citation, I can quickly turn this to APA, click this copy button right here, and now I have my APA formatted citation right there in my clipboard. I can paste it in any deliverable that I want into a notepad document, save that off as a text file, and I didn't have to do anything. It's completely formatted, 100% APA 7th edition compliant, and it just doesn't get any easier than that. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. You're going to come over, if your table of contents is not expanded, click that little hamburger menu. Then come over to the More Options ellipsis. Go to the citation. Make sure you're on APA, and then just simply hit this copy button. And then look for the copy notification up here that says that your citation has been copied. All right. I will demonstrate the search as well. So let's say we wanted to do some research on acceptable use policy. I should probably try to change it. Even just typing a portion of it gets it for you here. So I see what looks like an AUP on page 244. If I click that hyperlink, then it takes me directly to that content in the book, and I can read about acceptable use policy. So it's extremely valuable in that manner. The other thing I can do, and I'll show that real quickly, let's say I was researching what are information system security policies, or even just reading, within that first chapter of the book. I can come here and I can say, here's a key phrase. ISS policy should cover every threat to the system. Now, I just simply clicked and dragged to highlight that passage, and then I immediately get all of these things that I can do. My favorite, of course, being the highlighter. And now my passage is highlighted. The other thing I could do is, I might decide to come over here to the standard and just add a note there saying, I'll do something like consider this for the Lab 1 deliverable. Hit the check mark to accept my note, and now you can see that I have a note there. I'm going to hit this button here to, close the margin. And now I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to go to this little note document thing with a star on it. And then all in one pane now, I'm going to have access to all of my annotations. Here's the one that I just added earlier. I'm going to see also my note in context there. I'll see any bookmarks that I've set. And then if I've made flashcards as kind of a study aid, I can also access those from this single pane of glass. So really a useful feature. I can see easily that one way you might want to use this is to look over the material pertinent to a certain deliverable, do your highlighting, make your notes, and then come over here clicking this highlights, notes, bookmarks, and flashcards icon. And now you kind of have a formatted front-to-back notes area that you can use to build your actual content. So really helpful. So that's what I wanted to show you about the textbook. So I'm now going to click out of that, and I'm going to head back to the syllabus schedule link there. So we've covered, introduction to the syllabus. We looked at the textbook. I want to focus on the learning outcomes now, because these are really kind of important, right? So, when we're talking about the learning outcomes here, what we really want to do is we want to just kind of ensure that what we're getting out of the course align to those outcomes. So it's good to look at these at the beginning of the course, maybe in the middle of the course, and then, towards the end of the course. There are 6 outcomes that are important to you, right? You should be able to classify vulnerabilities into some kind of a security policy framework. You should be able to assess an implementation plan for an acceptable use policy. You should be able to outline a risk assessment policy. You should be able to analyze and create a security awareness training policy. You should be able to examine an incident response policy. And then you should be able to plan some kind of an organizational-wide cybersecurity policy approach, factoring in the 7 domains of information technology that ultimately will help your organization with compliance issues. All right, so those are the 6 course objectives. Now, I talked about the grading for the discussion boards. You're going to have 1 discussion board each week. Those are worth about 2% for a total of 16%. Now, I've already graded 2 weeks worth of discussion posts, And I think you'll probably agree at this point that, really if you just show up, make an intelligent initial post, and then a follow-up to another student, I'm going to grade you at 100%. And so the way that I do that is during the week, when you make your initial post, I'll post your grade. That can be as high as 70%. And then throughout the rest of the week, if you make that follow-up post to a student or to the professor, then I'm going to award you the additional 30% for the 100% score for that week. Now, in addition to the discussion boards, we do have lab assignments, and they really kind of constitute the bulk of the work that you're doing in this course. There is a research project in the final exam that you can see on the screen as well, but you're going to have 6 of those equaling almost 2/3 of your course grade. So you want to do well on these lab assignments for each unit. You see the research project, it's kind of a culmination of your lab work at 10%. And then your final exam, which, by the way, has to be proctored, so you should have probably already set up that proctoring at this point in the course, is worth 14%. So at this point, I think what I'd like to do is go to Unit 1 in the course, and I'm going to show you the very first lab. So here we are. I've clicked on Unit 1. You see my my introduction to the unit. There's some other announcements there for you pertinent to Unit 1. By the way, don't forget these study guides. They kind of distill down everything that you need to know for each unit. Your discussion board, and then the part that I want to get to here is the Unit 1 lab assignment. So you should always look at these before starting your assignment, right? Because they give you a nice overview. So first of all, you see, hey, this is worth 10% of your course grade, and it's due April 5th, or was due April 5th, 2022. They also give you a grading rubric, so you can click on that rubric, and you drop that down, and you can see exactly how each part of the assignment is going to be graded in terms of weight. All right? Obviously you can see content is 40 points, tasks 35 points, and then accuracy and writing mechanics 15 and 10 points, respectively. And then you get to the instructions. And I strongly encourage you to spend 15 or 20 minutes going over the instructions and deciding for yourself, this is what I need to do to produce a good deliverable, right? So the instructions tell us that we're going to define an AUP, that the AUP is for end users, that we're going to be able to identify key elements of a sample AUP, that we're going to learn how to mitigate threats and risks with an AUP, and then we're actually going to create an AUP, and that's the kind of the hands-on portion of the lab, if you will. Now the lab has 2 parts. Part 1 is researching acceptable use policies, which culminates in you writing a brief summary of the article located in Part 1 of the lab. And that should include, obviously, the key elements that you researched. And that needs to be 1 page in length. Part 2 of the lab is to design an acceptable use policy. So you're going to create an actual AUP, and you're going to be given an example AUP to use as a template from an online source. In fact, we're using SANS in this course. It needs to be at least 2 pages in length, and obviously we want to outline the key elements that you had researched. And you're going to do that inside the lab environment that accompanies the JDL textbook. And then the last part is to submit it, right? So if you need some help with writing, you can always go to the Writing Center directly here. But if you have your PDF downloaded from the lab environment, you can just simply click on Submit the Unit 1 lab assignment. So with that, let's go ahead and go into the lab environment. So that's the last link in Unit 1. And we're going to come to this Launch LTI link page. I'm going to hit that green Launch button, and the lab is going to load in. Now, these labs don't require virtual environments, so they load probably quicker than what you're used to. And there's two important parts here of interest to you. So there's the Open the Lab Guide, and there's the View Lab Report. So if I go to the Lab Guide, I'll show you that first. Then I have this guide that will kind of walk me through what we've just read in the overview in Unit 1, right? And then you get the additional information for the learning objectives. So, take your time to read over that, of course. And then you'll just want to click through each of these sections up near the top of the page. So now I'm going to go to the guided exercises, and I see Part 1, Research Acceptable Use Policies. So they give us some directions, and they say, hey, using your favorite search engine, look up this citation down below here and review that article, and then you're going to use that information to write a brief summary here in number 2. And you can see what I have written here in my brief summary. So I start out with Unacceptable Use of Technology in Schools, which is the title, and I give the in-text citation, and then I give my quick summary of what they covered in the paper, and then I bring out some highlights, and then I end with a reference. Now you can click on this pencil icon here, and you can actually enter the text right there. I tend to do mine offline in a notepad document or my favorite text editor, and then just copy and paste into this block here. Because, something that can happen with these kinds of online submissions is you get to writing, maybe it takes you a little bit longer, you got to take the dog outside to go to the bathroom, who knows, right? But the point is that it may actually time out on you, and so when you go to click save, it doesn't really save like it's supposed to. It forces you to refresh, and you might lose your work. So my pro tip to you is edit this offline and then just paste it, come back and paste it in when you're ready. Be sure you hit that save button. Now I'm going to hit cancel here because I've already saved it. All right, so now I'm done with Part 1. Now I'm going to go to Part 2. And in Part 2, it tells me to go to this website and review this example AUP. So I'm going to try to do that. There it is. And it wants me to actually download it. And so here it is. So this is a document entitled 369 on the SANS website. Now, if you've not heard of SANS, the SANS Institute has been around for a number of years now. But I can tell you that this is really a gold standard company when it comes to cybersecurity training. We use this where I work at U.S. Cyber Command, and we send our folks this training because we need the best training that private industry has to offer. And many of us do feel that that is provided by the SANS Institute. So whenever I see a course that uses SANS deliverables or templates or guidance, I think that you're in really good hands because that's a good sign. So anyway, the task here was kind of to examine this acceptable use document so you could get an idea of what an acceptable use policy might look like, right? Now, obviously, there's many, many different instantiations, but this is one example that would have a high recommendation, right? So some of the key elements is, an introduction, the rules and responsibilities, how we're going to ensure compliance to this policy, what hardware and software elements are covered, specifically email and messaging, internet use, and then generally prohibited uses, right? Those are the kinds of things you would expect to see in an AUP. And then as you kind of scroll through here, you can get a really good idea. What I like about this particular template, especially, is the fact that the author uses a table to outline the excuse me, roles and responsibilities, kind of like a RACI diagram, right? And so you can see that inform users is a responsibility of not only executive sponsors, but all managers, including the Chief Information Security Officer. And then independent compliance auditing would be conducted by somebody in an auditor role. If you look at the second row, implement user sanctions, again, the same two groups of people are responsible, but it's actually the CISO now who might be consulted in a situation where a user sanction is being advised. And yeah, so you can take a look at that. After you've analyzed this document, you should have a really good appreciation for what makes a good acceptable use policy. So with that, I'm going to go back to the lab view. The lab provides you some notes, some reflection points to think about based upon your review and analysis of that SANS document. Some things to consider as you get ready to draft your own AUP for a fictional organization. Excuse me. And these are really good because it gives you the context you need to write an AUP that is relevant. And then they give you some tips on designs, right? And so this is the information that I edited and put into the document. Let's see if it looks any different. Yeah, so I did some experimentation with this actually. So I tend to do my offline editing in a text editor, and I edit my documents in Markdown style. So that's where you see these double hashtags, and then I tried to incorporate some HTML paragraphs and line breaks to try to get it to kind of look correct in this lab document format. And I kind of had mixed success, and then finally I just decided, well, it's not worth it, because at the end when it prints out the PDF, it just kind of smushes it all together anyway. So get it into here in whatever way works for you is my message. Now once you've done that, you've complied with the two parts and you're ready to download your document. So there's a couple of things here. You can resize your font, and then if you hover over this, you can download the lab guide as a PDF. So if we click on that, then what you're going to see here in this window that popped up is you're going to see my default PDF editor, and then we have the lab guide, and we have everything that we just kind of went over there, right, throughout there. So you can have that if you want to have it offline. So I'm going to click out of that. So now we're back to the lab guide, and yeah, now I can go back to the guided exercises. You do not need to do the challenge exercise. All right, so I do want you to be aware of that. So I'm going to click out of that window, go back to the main lab window where we were a minute ago, and then I'm going to focus now on this View Lab Report, and that's going to bring up a formatted lab report that includes my edited work for Part 1 and Part 2. So there's my brief summary. And if I click on Part 2, I'll see my input for Part 2. So I can come back here now, and I should be able to click this PDF icon again. And the second time here, it takes a little bit as it formats that document together. And then now you can see that the information here is in a slightly different format, but it's got my email, my name. It tells me when the report was generated, and then it has my Part 1 summary, brief summary, and then it has Part 2, my design and acceptable use policy. And so you can see here where I started to do that formatting, using the HTML tags, it actually looks pretty good. And then pretty much where I stopped was on this third part of the standards, and that's okay. I can parse whatever submission you provide to me. Okay, so that's the lab, and that is an example of what you can do for yourself on each one of these lab deliverables. If you kind of follow that as you progress through the course, I think you'll find that things will go fairly quickly and fairly easy for you. Yeah, so now let's go back to the main course now, and I'm going to go back to the syllabus schedule, and then I'm just going to talk about the assignments that come into this section here. So if I were to expand that, you basically kind of get a repeat of what you see in Unit 1 inside of the Unit 1 link, but then you get to read kind of about the assignment in the Unit 1 assignment there. So in Unit 2, which is also Lab 2, there you get to develop a security policy framework implementation plan. So really your task there is to learn about security awareness training policies, and it is designed to give you a better understanding of how policies can be implemented at scale, and then what you can do to create and further research those policies. Unit 3, Lab 3 was defining a security policy framework. So you will be actually researching various security policy frameworks in this lab. And when we say security policy frameworks, we're talking about COBIT, we're talking about NIST, we're talking about the CIS 20 controls, and there are many frameworks out there. And so, it's not a cookie cutter one size fit all based upon your organization and what that organization is trying to get done. You can choose a security policy framework which best fits your organization. And so the point of this assignment is to match a security policy to the best way to mitigate the specific risks, threats, and vulnerabilities to your organization. And then based on your research, you're just going to kind of organize that into a way that you can incorporate that into a layered security strategy. In Unit 4, Lab 4, you'll actually then set about to creating a separation of duties policy. And a separation of duty is the notion that, you don't want the same person doing all portions of a task, right? So you don't want a person, baking the bread, and another person, in charge of ordering the supplies, and you want a third person to actually perform quality assurance on those products, right? If you have the same person doing them all, that's where you have, a tendency for human nature to enter into the process and can even result in things like fraud and, the criminal acts that can enter into things. And so we do a security policy for separation of duties. So you'll identify specific roles and responsibilities, and then you'll create that policy to address the management and separation of the duties. Unit 5, Lab 5, you'll create a security awareness policy, a very important policy for any organization, arguably just as important as the AUP. And you're going to identify the key elements of that policy, how that can, add to your overall layered security strategy. And then you'll create the policy, and that'll be your deliverable for that. In Unit 6, Lab 6, you'll create an incident response policy. And this is definitely one of those policies you want to have in place before you get breached, and you will be breached. And so you look at the major elements of incident response methodology. That's the prevent, detect, mitigate, and recover, and lessons learned kind of components. So you'll go into all those areas, and then you'll tailor an incident response policy again for your organization. And then in Unit 7 is kind of the culmination right? So we call it a research project on IT policy compliance and compliance technologies. But really what you're doing on this final project is you're just going to combine all of the previous work that you've done in units 1 through 6, all of those previous policies, and you're going to put those all into a single cohesive and professional deliverable. And that deliverable will be your security policy implementation plan aligned to security framework for the organization. All right? And then, of course, in Unit 8, you'll have the final exam, which is a comprehensive exam that covers all of the material in the course. And that's really all I have for you today. I do hope that you are getting along splendidly so far in the course. If you have any questions or concerns, please go to the Ask the Professor forum under the communication forums here on your navigation, and you can ask a question there. Or, of course, you can at any time contact me through my contact information that I've provided in the welcome video and also in the Start Here portion of the course. And so with that, I will end this live session. I do appreciate your attention today, and I wish you all the best throughout the remainder of the course. Thank you, and good day.